All right, today we are diving into something really fascinating. It's a system called the Alchemist's Pen. Now think of it as this toolkit that mashes up ancient storytelling with, believe it or not, modern programming concepts. It gives you a totally new way to think about personal change. We're not just talking about telling yourself a new story. We're talking about actually rewriting your own source code.
So, let's just jump right in with a question that really gets to the heart of what this whole thing is trying to solve. I mean, how many of us feel stuck, right? Just repeating the same patterns, living out the same narratives, day in and day out. But what if you could do more than just, turn the page? What if you could actually grab a pen and edit the text itself?
Okay, so first things first. We've got to understand the problem we're trying to solve. The system has a name for this feeling of being stuck. It calls it being trapped in the code. It's this state of narrative paralysis that can feel absolutely impossible to break out of.
And this visual really nails the core issue. See, on the left, you've got a healthy labyrinth. It's a puzzle, sure, but it has choices, different paths, and there's a way out. But on the right, that's what's called the universal loop. It's just one single path that repeats over and over and over. It's a loop that's fueled by a trauma script, trapping a person in this static identity. And this state has a name: social death.
And listen, this is not just some fancy metaphor. This is what happens when your story gets so stuck that you're not even seen as a person with agency anymore. You're just a collection of symptoms, a file in a cabinet. You completely lose your sense of authorship, that ability to write your own next chapter. So the big question is, how in the world do you break out of a loop that only has one path?
All right, let's talk about the solution. And it all starts with a pretty radical shift in thinking. It's not about fighting harder, it's about changing the entire game.
The traditional way we think about this stuff is what's called linear conquest. It frames recovery like a battle you have to win. You've got to fight your demons, you've got to slay the dragon. But honestly, that approach just leads to burnout. It's a constant, exhausting war.
So the Alchemist's Pen offers a totally different path: circular reclamation. Here, the goal isn't to win a battle, it's to rename the beast. It's about you becoming the programmer of your own reality, finding the faulty lines of code in your personal story, and literally debugging and rewriting them.
And this quote just sums it all up, doesn't it? This is the crucial shift in roles. You stop being the patient, this passive character in a story someone else wrote for you, and you become the author, the architect. You're the lead programmer with your hands right on the keyboard.
Okay, but how do you actually use these big, abstract ideas, especially when you're right in the middle of a crisis? Well, this is where the system gets really practical and tangible, through something it calls the haptic interface. Let's be real. When you're totally overwhelmed, your brain's ability to process complex ideas just goes out the window. You don't need some philosophical riddle to solve. You need a tool, something you can actually hold in your hands, something that makes sense right away. And here it is. This is that tool. The system uses a 52-card deck. It's called the Kinetic Engine as a haptic interface. Haptic just means related to touch. By laying these cards out on a table, you physically move the problem out of your head, where it's all chaotic and messy, and onto a surface where you can see it, touch it, and actually work with it.
The entire design philosophy is just brilliantly captured here. On one side, you have clean code for navigation. These are simple, direct terms like Kinetic Engine or the glitch. They don't require any translation when you're stressed out. And then on the other side, you have the magic of the content. These are the mythic, archetypal ideas like the dancers or the dragon that really spark your imagination. So you navigate with the code to safely access the magic. It's genius.
But here's the thing. The system doesn't just stop at giving you an insight. It makes sure that those aha moments actually lead to real-world change. Because look, it's one thing to have a breakthrough. It's a whole other thing to actually do something about it.
And this is the bridge that gets you there. Every single card comes with something called a debug task. And this isn't just a suggestion. It's a mandatory part of the mechanic. It takes the abstract idea from the card and turns it into a concrete, executable command, a specific action you have to take in the real world. Let me show you a perfect example of how this works. Let's say you're really struggling with isolation, and you draw the card for that experience. In this system, that card is called the silence. The process is so simple, but so powerful. So step 1 is the input. You draw the card. Step 2 is a protocol from acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. You externalize that feeling. You give the silence a color, a weight, and you literally place it on a chair across from you. This creates distance. And then step 3, the execution.
You use something called a habit stack to tie a new action to something you already do. After my coffee, I will speak one sentence out loud. It's this tiny, concrete step that starts to break the pattern.
Okay, let's look at one more core mechanic, and this one offers a completely different way to think about handling conflict and trauma.
So instead of that classic Western slay the dragon approach, which is all about brute force and creates a win or lose situation, this system introduces what it calls the Anansi playthrough. It's named after the famous trickster archetype. This is all about being clever, not just strong.
The goal here is to find a third way through a problem. It's not about ignoring the dragon or killing it. It's about negotiating with it, maybe outsmarting it, and actually transforming that conflict into a source of wisdom. You don't just survive your story, you integrate it.
So what's the whole point of all this? What's the actual output of debugging your code and renaming your beasts? Well, it's not just about ending up with a nice story. It's about reclaiming your entire life.
The endgame here is a real, measurable shift in what the system calls the 5 Rs of Citizenship. This framework goes way beyond just managing symptoms. It's about rebuilding a life of agency, connection, and real purpose. And what are they? It's about restoring your rights, your absolute right to define your own story, your roles, that shift from patient to author, your responsibilities for your own narrative hygiene, your relationships, moving out of isolation and back into community, and your resources, reclaiming your own history as a source of strength.
And this really brings us to the ultimate point. You have to take back the pen. It's about moving from being a passive consumer of your own history to being the active writer of your own source code. And in this way, recovery isn't just a personal journey. It's framed as a civic act, a responsibility to contribute your unique, authored story back to the world.
So we'll just leave you with that thought. The system gives you the tools, but you are the programmer. If you had total root-level access to your own internal script, what's the very first bug you'd fix? What's the first line you would change?